Okay, welcome everybody. I'll just let everyone file in. I'd be very grateful if you could head over to chat or Q&A and just let me know whether you can hear us and see us. That would be lovely. It's good to see some lovely names that I know. Janet and Maddie here and Addie, some lovely names of people that I work with and I know well. So if you could just let us know whether you can hear us and see us, that would be fabulous. You could just head to chat and let me know. That would be
Lovely.
very cool.
Yes.
Yep, people are
Hayley.
hearing us and seeing us.
Hi, Hayley.
Fabulous. Alrighty, so we're going to kick off because we've got some pretty cool information to give you to really hope that we open your eyes of what contact and connection is and why it is a bit of a puzzle. So this is the contact puzzle, why off-the-track horses struggle and what most people miss. And it's all about understanding the pieces of building connection because we talk about these words, contact and connection. What actually is it? So I'll introduce myself. My name is Dr. Shelley Appleton, and
I am Isabelle Chandler.
together we collaborate in our racehorse to riding horse program, the Off the Track Reboot. However, this webinar is relevant to everyone. We have a particular section that's very specific to the off-the-track horses because they do come with some unique challenges and when it comes to contact, that's very important to know about. Okay, now guys, there is a poll you'll be able to see. If you could do me a favor, I'm going to tell you later on in the webinar to complete that because I'd like you to listen to the webinar for a bit and then complete it because I'd really like to know whether we've done a good job or not at being able to give you some light bulbs about the contact puzzle. Okay, so in this webinar, I'm going to tell you a couple of stories about my own journey of understanding contact. The first story I'm going to tell you is about this little horse in this photograph here. This is me riding my horse Gift. Gift was a very special little pony. He did incredibly well in pony dressage, but he had a contact problem. And I just remember myself back then and what I used to think. So as you can see, if you have a good look at this picture, I want to show you, just want to point out some things. You can probably see that there's some white drool that's coming out of his mouth. He used to foam a lot. He was incredibly heavy in my hands. Like you can't see it there because I got gloves on, but under those gloves, I actually had strapping tape because he would pull my hand so hard that he would give me blisters. Because it was super heavy. I had really big biceps and muscles in my arms from holding him up. And what I continually did was just search for the bit. That's what I looked for, just the bit. And I just considered him like everyone else that I went to for lessons and coaching. He was a hard-mouthed horse. That was what I diagnosed him was and what everyone said, oh, he's just hard-mouthed. And people would say about the foam that used to come out of his mouth that was a good thing. And I could never understand because he was so heavy. How could this foam be good? So that was confusing. Also, I can tell you that strap on his noseband there is tight. And what I was doing in this particular photograph here is that I've been chosen to do a dressage demonstration from a visiting coach that had come over to running a masterclass, and we were being the examples. And I can tell you that in that photograph there, I had him on our special setting when we were out, which was super tight, strapped his mouth shut. So I had a certain level on his noseband for when I was just training at home. And then I had competition setting that was super tight. And, that was just my frustration. And one frustration that I had, a big one, is that we had done very well in Australian dressage in official prelim and official novice and in elementary. However, I was struggling to get up to medium Not that I couldn't do flying changes on him, the fact that he would run off and run through my hand, and it took me half a lap of the arena to pull him up. So I was struggling to get to medium because that's not a good look in front of the judge. Anyway, in one lesson when we were working on this, flying changes and getting to pull up afterwards, is that all that foam that you can see coming out of his mouth turned bright orange. And I stopped and I had a look and I realized that he'd actually bitten through his lip at the front. And it absolutely mortified me. So I'd made his mouth bleed. I hadn't ripped through his mouth, but I had created him so much angst that he'd actually bitten through, so much tension there, he'd actually bitten through his lip. And I was horrified. Because back then you've got to understand that I couldn't see that all those symptoms there and all those behavior was a horse that was struggling. I just saw a horse that was frustrating, that was just difficult. So anyway, I made his mouth bleed. It absolutely horrified me. I stopped the lesson. The coach didn't understand why, because that horrified me. Does that sound familiar? Anyway, I drove home and I was crying because if that was dressage, I didn't want to do it. I needed to see blood that I was actually hurting my horse. Anyway, a few days since that, I was really in a pretty dark place because I loved my horse and I'd hurt him. And that allowed my ears to open up, okay? And I remember there was YouTube playing in the background and I'd kind of let it running. And I only ever took notice of dressage riders. That's the only thing I was interested in. I was a dressage rider. I was in the dressage silo. And what happened to come up on my computer was a guy in a cowboy hat. And all I heard, though, was the voice. And the voice said this, and I'll quote it. "There is no such thing as a hard-mouthed horse." And, of course, that pricked my ears up. "There is a horse that's resistant to pressure and habituated to pain. And you can actually tell. You can do a test by checking their lateral flexion response, which is pick up one rein and watch how the horse responds to it." That person happened to be Clinton Anderson. That was his voice. And I know Clinton gets a bit of pushback in the world, but I'll always be super grateful for him playing on that video that day because he gave me this tremendous insight. And let me explain. So after watching that, or hearing it, first of all, hard-mouthed horse, no such thing, resistant to pressure, didn't understand the bit, habituated to pain, oh dear. Anyway, I went and got IFT. I saddled him up and I went to my arena. And I remember exactly where I was sitting. I remember the day. It was a beautiful sunny day. It was around about this time of year. And I reached down the rein and I picked up the right rein. And Gift turned his head to the left, the opposite. And right then and there, I had this complete light bulb moment that was like, oh my God, you don't understand the bit. You don't understand how to follow the bit. So anyway, also in the video, it was explained that, you release the pressure when the horse is doing the right thing. No one ever told me that. So I sat there and I just kept flexing him until he softly came around to the right. Then I let go and I continued that. And lo and behold, in 45 minutes with one idea that horses learn by the release of pressure, and that you can actually tell if a horse understands something by asking them the question and watching them, I was able to solve, and Gift went from a hard-mouthed horse to a soft-mouthed horse with one idea. And that absolutely blew my mind. And it really perplexed me how I could be, like, I was in my early 30s at the time. I'd ridden horses for the majority of my life. No one had ever said that. I had gone to all these fancy dressage lessons from all these tops coaches, lots of them who'd been to the Olympics, and no one had ever pulled me up and said, right, let's stop. Let's see if your horse actually understands the bit. And that really blew my mind. So that is my contact backstory. Izzy, do you have any similar stories to this?
I think what you said there was nobody had ever taught you this.
No.
Um, that's it. Growing up, you just have lessons and you just hold the reins, take contact, and that's it. Nobody explains what contact is, how it should feel. If the horse understands anything, it's just, this is contact, work away. And I think, then you grow up and then, the more you do, you don't actually gain any more information than that. It's just,
No.
it's a thing and that's it. So it's not surprising that we then run into all these problems.
Yeah. And I think back when I was a kid, I remember being frustrated with not being able to put my pony round. And I remember that when I did show course back there when I was little, and I just used to ride in a Pelham or a double, and that just made them soft. And then my next learning, I remember seesawing. And so if the horse put its head up, you just seesawed and you just held them down. And that's really where I'd got to up until this particular moment. So I could make a horse round by seesawing or pulling and holding them there. But yeah, I just think back then and how little I understood. Like I didn't understand at all. I had no clue that the horse actually had to understand the bit, and the horse responded to the bit, and you had to teach them. Like that
Well,
blew my mind.
I think, it used to be certainly, back in the 90s, it was quite a proud, your box of bits was
Oh,
quite you
yes.
weren't a real rider unless you had a box of 50 bits, plenty with chains and curbs and all the things so that all you did was change the bit if you had a problem with the horse
Yeah.
rather than
Yeah.
against the contact.
Yep. So I can say back then, which also kind of horrifies me, is back then I had to see blood to work out that my horse was struggling and I was actually hurting my horse.
Mm.
Now I don't need that. So Izzy, you can probably see from that photograph, just from that photograph, can you see that horse is uncomfortable?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you can see by the muscling in his neck. You can also tell by other things like why he was pulling. We'll go into this a little bit further. Was because he was pulling because he was doing two things. He was throwing himself onto the forehand first of all. Okay, really pulling himself onto the forehand for balance wise, but he was pulling to protect his mouth from me because when you pull, the other part can't do this. So he was pulling and leaning as a way to protect himself. And you can see that all throughout his muscle. And why he was pouring all the foam was coming out of his mouth because the poor guy couldn't breathe properly. Okay, and all the stress. And you can see here around his gullet all how that's all thickened and ropey from all the pulling and, well, Lizzie, do you know about this? Or the roping around here and his gullet here on his neck?
Yeah, all the overbuild with
Yeah.
the tension because there's a lot of brace through the top of the
Yeah.
neck and
Yeah.
through the jaw
Yes.
to hold
Horrible.
yourself against the bit like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Just really, and I just think back about, and truly when I talk about this, I actually feel like crying. I will admit that. It's something I'm very shameful about, but and what I do now, this was how my journey to sit here in this chair started, was because of this, because it was this moment here, or this moment when I had my eyes opened to some massive, crucial understanding of contact. The horses actually have to learn how to respond. And all the problems you have with contact are just really signs that the horse is struggling and what it means. That sent me down this rabbit hole, which is really what I've been able to learn about what contact actually is, what connection actually is, and how to put it to the mere mortal like me to break it down. And I remembered I had to study a lot of people to actually work out, like lots of people to find all the bits and pieces to understand how is contact really built? Because as I said, I went to all these real fancy trainers and no one ever told me this stuff. Horses either. I even remember, and I really, really rate Carl Hester. I really rate him and his knowledge. But I remember listening to him in in a masterclass. And he said, look, some horses are just born, your horses are born with a soft or a hard mouth. And I remember hearing that and going, yeah, it's just unfortunate. When it's like, well, no, that's like you can do stuff about it. And, he's super. Okay. So that leads me to this quote here. One of my favorite quotes is by Karen Rolfe. A number of years ago on my podcast, Canna Therapy, I interviewed Karen Rolfe, and I did hear her say this in, some presentation of hers that I was listening to. And I did confirm, Karen, is this your quote? And she said, yes. If you want to piss a horse off, put a bit of metal in its mouth and pull on it. And that really describes what I was doing with Gift and what a lot of people are accidentally doing. Because if the bit just pulls and that's all it does and it has no meaning, you will piss them off, worry them, make them want to protect themselves. And so this is what we got to make sure we don't do. We don't want to make a horse feel like it's just got a bit of metal in its mouth that's been pulled on. That bit has to be comfortable. That bit has to make sense. And as I say to every horse when I'm coaching people, that bit, we've got to make that horse believe that that is their bit, that they control the pressure on it. And there is a way and an art of doing that.
Well, we have a saying in racing that it takes two to pull.
Mm-hmm.
So
yes.
you have to be, if you're pulling, they're pulling.
Yeah. And I remember hearing that because every now and then I remember hearing, when a coach would say to me, it's like, you can't pull. And I'm like, how the hell do I not pull on Gift? But this is a crucial one. There was another reason why I was pulling, and that's because I didn't have an independent seat. And I was having to pull because my seat wasn't dependent. And so a lot of people are inadvertently doing what I was doing and also a part of what I was doing because my seat wasn't independent enough. And a lot of it had to do with being in this pulling thing, is that it had shifted my weight forward and I was hanging off his mouth. So I was balancing on his mouth, which is another reason why he was putting himself on the forehand and pulling so that he could protect his mouth. So Izzy, this brings me to my next story, and the next person that gave me a tremendous insight into contact and connection. And I'm going to define these words in a minute after this story, is this very cool 10-year-old kid. Well, she was 10 years old at the time. I think she's over 20 now. But she was, I started working with her when she was 10, and she had a mother that was very keen on, giving her some really good skills as a rider. So she had horse training lessons from me, and she had horse riding lessons from a top show rider. Anyway, so what I would do, she's mainly the child that I worked with the most in my career. Mainly I work with adults, but every now and then I will work with a child, but she's the child I worked with the most. Anyway, this little kid, her mum would kind of collect the ponies from Pony Club that were rogues, and she'd take them in. And well, Lauren and I would unpick them. So I'd teach Lauren how to unpick these ponies. And of course, we'd always start off with groundwork. So we'd go through groundwork, and then she would get on and we would start working through the ridden work. Anyway, I noticed this really amazing thing that would always happen. So I had worked out the bit responses that I wanted the horse to actually be able to get. And then I had this process of way of getting it under saddle. But with this little kid, her name was Lauren, when Lauren would get to the stage of picking up the reins, within minutes, without even doing any of the specific exercises that I'd learnt about how to work through contact that I'd normally do with adults, etc. Within minutes, these ponies would go, just put themselves into this most amazing posture. Like within minutes. Sometimes it'd be 5, sometimes it would be 10, but just with time and just with motion, these horses would all, boom, go into this amazing posture. Now, what I realized is that Lauren had a really good independent seat, but she just held her hands. And I said to her one day, because I was really curious, I said, Lauren, are you doing anything with your hands? And she went, oh no. No, 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 I'm not allowed to do anything with my hands. Anna, that was her show rider coach, will she'll get really angry at me. I'm not allowed to move my hands. Just got to stay here. So I was like, okay, here we go. So Lauren hadn't learned to do any correcting or flexing to the inside or anything like that, or any seesawing or any one. She just kept her hands super still. So what she showed me is if you get a horse relaxed and all the groundwork that we did got the horse in a better state of mind, we got them more ambidextrous, got them more supple in groundwork. And then as we started working through the ridden stuff, these these ponies were different. They were no longer gnarly or worried. And because they were relaxed and their bodies were feeling good, that as soon as she kind of connected them up with these really still hands, that the horses all found very clearly where they could go to feel comfortable. And they just, boom, go into this beautiful posture. So she really showed me all about the role of the hands. The role of the hands is really to do as little as possible. You do a bit of steering, but you just keep them nice and still and going with the horse. Because if you're doing lots of seesawing and yanking and pulling and changing, you're constantly doing this on the horse's mouth that blurs it. But her hands were just nice and still. The horse could actually get really good clarity about where the bit was. They weren't having to protect themselves from it or, listen to this white noise that was coming from the hands. And because we dealt with the rest of their body, and Lauren was a nice little balanced rider, vroom, the horses would just go into this really lovely posture. So, Izzy, have you had any experience like this? Does that story ring true for you at all? Give you
Yes,
any memories?
absolutely. And, a little bit different, but say with the racehorses, when you're working on the track, if you have a horse that's relaxed and comfortable, doesn't mind going around the track, doesn't have a lot of anxiety, has a pretty good body, and the whole idea when you're riding track work is you put your hands on the neck, you bridge the reins, put the hands on the neck. So the horse takes contact against that. You don't actually have your hands lifted, they're still. So if you have a nice soft horse going around and you bridge your reins, that contact is really steady and they'll pop into a nice frame, and then they can just work around without any interference, which is very different to the horses that are, that are pulling and they might have their head up or they lose their balance. And so you're always shifting against them. But the ones that are going around nicely relaxed with a good body will just sit in a frame and it doesn't cost them any energy to work. It's just, they're just sitting there with a nice contact.
Yeah, yeah. We're such humans because we're humans, primates. When we want to fix something, we immediately go to our hands. It's a trait of a human trait that we just immediately want to fix things with our hands. And it's quite counterintuitive to just go quiet. But when you look at it from the racehorse perspective or just a riding horse's perspective, that gives them a lot of clearness. It's not, you remove the noise. Yeah. So anyway, so the first story I told you about gift, everyone, was about horse has to actually understand the bit. The next one of the story of little Lauren here, when she was 10 years old, teaching me about hands, was teaching me about how the horse's body would connect. And, how it's an all-over body thing and it's not giving a lot of, a lot of hand signals. There's got to be a lot of quietness with our hands and relaxation through the body and allowing the horse to, to work it out, to be able to get their body moving. But relaxation and the body being able to move a balanced way is a massive part of it as well. Okay, so my next insight, what causes us problems with contact, is the term on the bit. Now, I read this from a number of interviews. I've heard it discussed by dressage master Harry Bolt, a very famous German dressage master, and also Stefan Peters, who was a US dressage rider. Both heard them talk about it, and they're both German. And they both bring up that the term on the bit is in their belief, has created a lot of contact and connection problems in the English-speaking world. So language shapes our thinking. So traditional dressage terms such as on the bit or frame or outline all describe what a horse looks like, okay? Not how it functions, okay? So not the mechanics. It's all the appearance, not the mechanics. So this has led to generation of riders that focus on the horse's head and mouth because it's bit, frame, or whatever, rather than the mechanics of how the whole body's working. And in fact, both, Harry Bolt and Stephen Peters have said, Stephen Peters actually said this, to be correct, that he believes a much better term to on the bit would be muscle them up. Muscle. It's more about the back than about the head, which is super interesting. Anyway, posture creates contact, okay, not the other way around. So the head and the neck don't create posture, okay, they reflect it. True contact and connection emerge when the horse understands the aids, the insight that gift gave me, is physically comfortable and can organize its body to what's called transfer force efficiently through functional locomotion. Now, that's very fancy, Izzy. That just means, if we say, is that, energy has to transfer through the horse, from the hind leg all through the horse. Now, with gift there, when I'm hanging on to him, he couldn't do that. He was so braced and tight and locked down that force could not do that. They can't go through, so you're not going to get connection. So a better question would be, instead of asking, is the horse on the bit, does the horse understand communication? And is it moving in a way that promotes, this movement of energy through the horse that hasn't been blocked by any tension or lockdown? So we need to shift our focus from appearance on the bit, frame, outline, to the mechanism of what's actually happening with contact. Has to be purposeful communication and connection that comes as a natural outcome of the way the horse is moving. And with riding, we can develop their strength, their balance, and their functional organization of the body. Now, I know that all sounds a bit complicated, but I'm going to keep it pretty simple. I also want to point out with this photograph is like understanding that it's not about the head and neck. It's not about posture. That's why draw reins and that kind of thing, it's not about the head and the neck. You can force the head down, but forcing the head down or in like this does nothing more than forcing the head down. It doesn't affect, it's got to be a result of the whole body. Just jamming the horse's head down with some draw reins or tying the horse's head down the tie rein, that's not going to give you functional contact. That's going to end up with like what I had with gift either way, is a horse that's actually not moving properly. It's protecting itself. And if you don't build it functionally, you're going to end up sending your horse down the line to get damaged. Okay, and that's the truth. They're going to have wear and tear, and they're going to break down, as well as having behavioural problems 1,000,000 to 1, because they don't find being ridden good. So here's some definitions for you. So what is contact? Contact purely just means to communicate or touch. That's all it means. So contact can be good, which is what we hope to do. It can be bad. It can be poor. It can be consistent. It can be inconsistent. So contact is just means of communicating or touch. And to be honest, although I've got this picture here of this horse, I've just got the hand and the bit is contact. To be honest, we've got contact all over the horse, from our seat to our legs, and everything is still like a form of contact. But this here, what we're focusing on today is, how we do talk through the bit, etc. But what is connection? Okay, connection is the action of linking one thing to the other. And in a riding horse, I know I talked about force transfer and all these fancy terms before, but what it really means is I want this flow of energy from the hind leg that can go through the horse, through the horse. So here should the hind end should be the power, the engine of the horse, which is what was happening in Gibbs' case is that a lot of horses are just on the forehand. They're dragging themselves around in front. So their back end's being turned off. The back end's just dragging along behind, and the horse is pulling themselves along in front. Izzy, do you have any comments on that?
I think, yeah, like what you were saying with force transfer, the thing you have to think about is connection allows that force transfer, and contact can block that force
Mm,
transfer. You have to kind of think about it as being able to move from the hind end all the way through the horse,
mm,
and not be blocked. And sometimes, even though you're not quite sure what's going on, what's going wrong when you're struggling with this sort of thing, you can tell that you're lacking that force transfer, and that's that lack of connection.
mm. And it might also come in the form of rushing.
Yeah.
It might come in the form of the horse not going forward or just feeling like it's got no power. It's super interesting. But just, I know we've talked about some fancy word like force transfer. Just imagine we want this hind leg to step up and under and use the power to push. And as it push, we want to lift up in front as the horse goes, as they lift their thoracic here and up. That all comes from the hind end being the powerhouse. And what we can do, with what I was doing with gift and a whole lot of other contact issues, it means you're creating a block. You're not allowing that to happen. The horse is locking itself down to protect itself, that it's bracing and locking, and it's basically just moving its legs, and most of it's coming from, pulling itself along in front. If you're a dressage person, you might have heard of back movers and leg movers. Okay. Leg movers is when the horse has just locked itself down and braced. It's all braced up, protecting itself. You won't get this lovely flow of energy through when the horse is all braced and locked down. And it can do that for physical reasons as well. Okay, Izzy. So, racehorses and their relationships a bit. So, what we just talked about was something that's very general that relates to all horses. But, this webinar is, really try to direct our people that are in or interested in or have racehorses. Of course, Izzy and I are very, passionate about bringing understanding and awareness and how to help these horses off the track. Is that they come with extra baggage off the track. And I thought, Izzy, tell us about the racehorses and why they come with extra bit baggage off the track.
Okay, so very different to your regular horse. The bit in a racehorse is used a bit differently. When your racehorses don't learn to steer and collect as such the way that regular horses do. If you look at this bottom picture here where I am riding a racehorse, I think that's in a race. She won by about 5 lengths, that mare. So wasn't really pushing her out, but it shows you like a very good regular position that you're in when you're riding a racehorse. When they gallop, they can't tuck their head in. It has to be stretched out. So my hands are there, sitting there. The horse is going generally in a straight line. You don't turn a racehorse around a track, lean them side to side. So all the bit really is doing is guiding the horse in a straight line. And you sit nicely against that bit. It's a bit of contact, but you're not really doing much in the way of controlling the horse rather than maybe down one gear, up one gear. So then we have a look at the top horse, and this is the problem. You're really only using the bit as a guide until something happens. So the main reason you use the bit in a racehorse is if they've gone wildly off track and you have to reef them back in. That's why we have a ring as well around the snaffle so that the bit can't be pulled through the mouth, which tells you how much force you might have to use. If you've got a horse at a flat gallop that won't steer, you really have to correct them quite dramatically. And the other reason you use the bit is if the horse is going too fast and you need to bring it back, which can be incredibly hard if adrenaline is up, the horse really wants to get going or is very anxious about their work, then you really have to pull on that bit. So, in general, the only times you're really using a bit on a horse is for major corrections. So, that's, where a lot of that anxiety can start. If you have a very nice, soft, tractable horse, they will probably come off the track not too bad. If you have a horse that's in any way been anxious, sore, which makes them hard to steer, scared of other horses, any of that, you're going to have a horse that's had some pretty serious correcting. And problem is those bits, the ring bit there has a snaffle, so it has a single jointed snaffle, which when you pull hard on that, rams into the roof of the horse's mouth. So they'll often have some bruising on the soft palate. Or the other bit that you generally use is a straight bar that then has a kind of connected metal bit underneath, which is for horses that hang very hard. So again, it can't be pulled through the mouth, but it can be sort of hit against their jaw. Or the other problem with a straight bit is it's actually very hard to pull them up in it. So you have to pull very, very hard in their mouth. So I think that's sort of one of the main things that people aren't aware of is that then when you go and pick the reins up and that bit, or the horse feels that bit in its mouth, there can be a lot of anxiety there left over from before.
I find I like to describe them is that many of them have a gnarly relationship with
Yeah.
the bit. They do a lot of chewing, that kind of thing, neuroticness with their mouth because, and I believe they do that because they just feel a bit what might just attack them. So I think if they just keep everything moving, like neurotically, it's some type of trying to protect their mouth or bracing against it. But I do find, when people don't, you've got to rebuild their. So with racehorses, it's very important. You've got to rebuild their relationship with the bit because they can just have this baggage.
And it'd be
phobia of it.
exactly the same with standardbreds not being
Oh,
ridden, but they're still even worse because you see the
yeah.
guys in the cart, they sit right back in the
Mhm.
cart and kind of hang off the
Yeah.
horse's mouth.
Well,
So they've got the same.
yeah. And they don't bend well. You standard owners out there, and it's just like bend.
No.
They gotta be straight, they gotta be straight. So, if you got on your off the track thoroughbred that's freshly off the track or a standardbred and you went off to just say your, you know, riding lesson for whatever you wanted to do, you're not gonna get a horse that steers very well, okay? Or necessarily stops really well or goes in a nice frame because that's not what the bit means for them. So part of our program is understanding and our process that we use to remouth them basically, develop their relationship with the bit and being ridden from scratch. But unlike other horses, they've just got this bit of baggage because these have been professional workhorses that have had the bit introduced in their job that they've learnt very well. And horses don't forget things, so you've got to represent that to them, and that's a real common mistake that people make. And when we start working with people going through the program, they really get some quite light bulb moments about it. Okay, so there's more. Okay, there's more, and this is also Izzy's department. So I've just had Haley said retraining my standardbred to saddle is proving to be super challenging with their remouthing. Yeah, and we'll give you some insights here about how we do it. But yes, absolutely. Because, they've got an understanding of that bit and what you want to do with that bit on them is different from what they have done before. So first of all, up front with horses, we can have a contact communication problem because the communication they've had through the bits being different, and some of it can leave them feeling a little bit concerned about the bit, and you'll have some baggage there just with the communication. Now, the next bit that has to happen is they've got to be able to connect through their body. Now, this can be a problem too. So racehorses and their ability to connect their bodies, this can be an issue too. Can't it, Izzy? Take us through these photographs.
So we look at this first photo that's probably a few months after Duke, the legend, was
Okay.
retired from racing. Now, you look at that and you think he looks great, right? He's nice and shiny, well muscled. He's still muscled in a racing frame. So if you have a look here, he's still very tight through the flank, through the stifle area here. We've still got a lot of overbuild in front of the shoulder because um, the way that racehorses move is very different to the way that we want them to move when ridden. They're pushing out behind, reaching forward. They get so they are quite on the forehand. That's how you gallop, and you're pushing out with the power behind. So you can see that he's very up in front, but there's nothing else really there. This is still going to be a horse that when we're talking about that connection from that hind leg coming forward, he's the wrong shape. There's still going to be a lot of blockage there. And you look at that front end, you're going to have to try quite hard to get that horse to collect, as we look for collection later on in that shape. He's still a bit upside down and he's still very braced. He still has a lot of muscle there from his old job. So then we go to the next photo where he looks quite collapsed, looks a bit pot-bellied. And this is where people sort of freak out and think, oh, I got this horse. He looked amazing. What's happening? Well, we're getting rid of all that brace. And unfortunately, we can't really get them into a better shape until they've lost all of that original racing shape.
Mm.
And the only way to do that is to let that brace go and then build it up again. If you really want to get them into the right shape, a lot of people will just take a horse off the track and carry on with training. So they will stay muscled, but you will find more often than not, those horses will really struggle with contact and connection because all we've done, again, is try to force them into a frame with a body shape that isn't actually made for that. You look at that first photo, that horse is all ready to stretch out as far as he can and just gallop, push behind, stick his neck out. So then finally, once we actually start doing, we do some body work, we fix feet, we get all of those things checked, make sure the teeth are fine, which are a lot of your basics before you start. And then we start the reboot process, which is actually, using the muscles that we're going to need in a riding horse. And you can see he's built up in a much better way. If you look at the flank and the stifle, he's a lot softer. The pelvis is a lot softer. We've got a much softer neck, and he's lost almost all of that bulking up that is using the front end to pull himself forward. And when you look at this horse, it doesn't look like it's going to be very many steps until you get nice contact that allows nice connection. His body is now in a shape that
And
is
Izzy, this was only partway through the
Yeah.
groundwork, wasn't it?
that was
Yeah.
I don't even think we hadn't even got on him yet.
Yeah. Yeah. That was just after he'd had a lot of round penning at this stage to help get his body, because racehorses are very one-sided. They can be very one-sided when they come off the track. So it's helping them develop that ambidexterity and working their body to even them out.
And I guess we should mention too, Duke came off the track having had 96 starts as a 10-year-old. So when you look at that first photo compared to the third photo, that's a whole lifetime
Yeah.
of change that we've made in only, a couple of months.
Mm.
And, with 96 starts, imagine if you don't
Yeah.
work through the process of rebalancing him, getting him in the right shape.
Yeah.
You're struggling with contact the whole time. You can't just change that immediately.
Yeah. And there's a bit more to it than that. Another big point of the groundwork is to kind of recalibrate his nervous system and his mind, that we don't want him just to act on his adrenaline and gallop. This is all about upwards and downwards transitions and regulating your stress and your emotions to relax, to go up, come back, relax. That we want as the riding horse. That wasn't necessarily an emphasis of their job before. So you're working on them physically, mentally, and emotionally. Now, what can happen? I did this very quickly, but sometimes a lot of the horses off the trackers that come off the track, whereas Duke had a supported letdown with you, looking after his feet and giving him body work and addressing any injuries he had. Some horses don't get supported right, so they go through like a full-on collapse. So I just wanted to touch on this quick because, like, these horses, if they haven't been supported, they need to be resurrected even further before you can do work on. So I just thought I'd throw that in before going to our next slide, which is this one. Izzy, you want to walk us through this? Because again, this is a problem when we got to understand that the quality of your horse's contact or contact problems can come from injury or wear and tear from the other parts of their body besides their mouth.
Yeah. So these are two really common shapes that we see in horses off the track. And if we look at the first one of the hindquarters, number one, obviously this horse has no glutes, which are the muscles, the bum muscles over the top there. So glutes have a lot to do with stability, a lot to do with balancing the front end, a lot to do with the strength of the hind end. So straight away, you've got a horse that can't really balance their hind end very well, which means therefore they can't balance in front when you ask for that contact. He's very different. The musculature, both sides, is very different. He's going to be quite uneven, one side compared to the other. And then you can see what is pretty common, which is this sort of separation of the hamstrings down the middle here on the right side, more so than the left side, which is where you actually get there's two hamstring muscles down there. You can get like a separation that kind of like a tear. It gets quite thick, gets a bit of
Yeah.
scar tissue through there. You're going to have a big restriction in how far forward this leg can step and how well they can push off, because the hamstrings are also stabilizing muscles for when the hind legs are in movement. So when you look at that horse, you think about if you are trying to get contact and connection, what's probably going to happen is this horse will really struggle to have any contact. He'll want to be sticking his neck out because he doesn't have the balance to round and lift through the chest. But also, you're probably going to find that if you force it, he's going to lose his stride altogether, start grinding on the bit, probably have to twist. You'll often find they'll twist the head because it's the only way they can balance while having the head, collected as such. So, before you even start this horse, and it doesn't matter if you put side reins on, if you put draw reins on, if you just force it down, he's going to have to twist his body into all sorts of shapes to balance that. And you're not going to be able to get any kind of true contact or true connection because his body just physically can't.
Yeah. And it does drive me nuts, Izzy, and I suppose it drives you nuts as well, as people look, horse has got no top line. I've got to give it some special feed to build the top line. It's like, guys, top line is a function of how the body's moving. Is it functional or dysfunctional? It's about compensation. So Izzy, do you want to, this horse had no top line.
Yeah.
Giving him more top line food, not going to be the answer. You've got to sort out this horse's wear and tear on its body. You've got to do some work on its body. It's not just feeding it top line, do it in side reins or a passoa and lunging it around for, 63 hours. It doesn't work like that, does it, Izzy?
No. And, if your horse looks like this and they're struggling to put on any top line, they're struggling to build those glutes up, it means there's something else going on in the body.
Yeah.
that they
Yeah.
can't use themselves in that way. So it probably needs more investigation into what is happening with the joints, what is happening in the
Yeah.
front end.
And its feet.
Also,
Its
yeah, and
feet.
then
This
for sure,
horse
I
had,
guarantee it'll have terrible hind feet.
yeah, this
Um,
horse had, its feet, its angles were out. It had sore
yeah,
feet as well. So part of this horse's recovery was to it needed to be shod for the time period for it to recuperate. Yeah.
yeah.
What
And
about
then
this horse here?
so we
This
look at this
classic one.
horse, and again, you can see that those angles on those hind feet. So this is an important thing to check. See how if you follow that coronet band from the heel up, that line points right up to the middle of the stomach there. That line should actually point behind the front knees.
Yeah.
So when you look at a horse like that, that's why that horse has that U shape behind, which is super common because the hind feet are tucked under. The whole hind end has to tuck under because you do it yourself. You try and stand on your heels with your toes up off the ground, it pulls all the way down the back of your legs. So it can give you what appears to be a nice round bum because it's tucked under, but then the whole rest of the hind end is not functional. And that horse, again, doesn't look balanced and they'll have that big dip in the back. So you look at that horse and it doesn't matter what you do in front, you're not going to be able to lift that horse's back up and release the hind end to be nice and soft and flowing because it is stuck very much in a shape. And I would say, too, this horse will probably have a nice, round, high head carriage that will look kind of like self carriage. Its head will be high and its neck will be high, its head will be under, but it'll be quite behind the bit and it will be quite sucked in the chest because the opposite of the first horse, which will probably have its head stuck out and all its weight forward,
Mm-hmm.
all of this horse's weight will be kind of disappearing into the middle. The middle's sucked down and the bum and the head are kind of just out around it, but it's trying to squeeze itself all into a very small space to
Mm-hmm.
take away any of the tension because the body isn't able to actually move and flow.
Yeah. And I suppose this is why you got contact issues because what you're trying to get the horse to do with its head is out of kilter with what it needs to do to remain upright or move comfortably.
Yeah,
So
like
you're fighting the body.
the head's the balance.
Yeah.
It's the counterbalance for
Yeah.
the rest of the body. So if you're struggling with contact, it's a really good sign that the body isn't in balance. And
Mm-hmm.
you have to go looking for why that is.
Oh, yeah. Now, so the smartest place to begin contact issues is on the ground, believe it or not. You've got to get the body functioning and the horse learning how to follow feelings. Okay, follow the bits, got to learn to follow a halter first. So we've got that's where we start our program. That's my ultimate thing. With my story of gift, I'll tell you just very quickly that when I got my light bulb moment, I'd heard about groundwork and seen that it might be beneficial, but I wasn't interested in it. It was like, just show me the stuff in the saddle, right? And I was be able to make big impacts on that. But then I started dabbling with groundwork and it was like, oh my God, it made the under saddle stuff so much easier, so much faster. So, starting on the ground might seem like going backwards, but it's not. You're refining it. You're getting rid of all the gnarly bits from the ground up. Okay, because it's much easier, it's faster this way, believe it or not. I know you're probably sitting there going, it can't be. It's like, yes, it is. Okay, you dig into all the sorts of tension. You help unpick, especially in the racehorses, the impact of their racing career, of how they can be very one-sided and how they go in a certain way. You saw those pictures of Duke, how his body changed into a horse that was more set up to be a riding horse than a racehorse. But it also does something else really important. Groundwork helps you identify any soundness or injuries that you can get the management for that are going to cause a glitch in your contact that Izzy was just talking about then. Then another tip, this is another success tip, especially with the off-the-trackers, is that when I start transitioning groundwork to riding foundation work, I do it without the bit. Take the bit out of their mouth. and I just ride bitless. Because it contains so much baggage there of the bit, just getting the bit of metal out of their mouth just doesn't distract them. You'll see that'll take a lot of tension out of them, that their protective things or how they felt about it did. And so this is picture here. This is Dash, one of our case studies for our program. And Izzy's just riding him here in a cavesson, and working through all the responses. And that made a huge issue, a huge improvement, just by removing the bit. Okay, you remove the unnecessary noise and you give the horse space to learn and connect. And then once they get really good and accepting of riding and how to move and way more balanced, way more confident in that, then I introduce the bit back. I'm definitely not a bitless only person. I don't care if you do ride bitless forever, that's fine. But I do actually believe that working off the bit ultimately when you do more training is actually better than just working on their face in bitless. I got some opinions about that, but it is, to me, it's an important phase is to remove the bit for a period of time. Then what we do, I'll just show you this here. This is a case study, a little bit. This is a horse here with a bit. You can see going around like head twisting and everything like that. And this is him being ridden, just taking the bit out. That was all we did, just to show and prove that removing the bit removes a hell of a lot of tension and a lot of contortion from it. However, it's not, as I said, I love how I've got very good at being able to introduce the bit back, because you absolutely can. But it is something that can. So I like getting the horse really good, being walked, trodden, cantered on a loose rein and doing some basic responses, just bitless, before I introduce the bit back. However, if you're someone that goes, I refuse to do that, I want to use a bit, that's fine. You can also just use a bit for the entire thing. It's just if you want the secret sauce success tip, it's actually going through a period of time bitless. Here is just some bitless setups just to show you. So this is King. He's our latest project horse here with Izzy. We've got the cavesson and we've just got the bit over there, which allows Izzy to ride off the cavesson and then onto the bit. He's at that point, isn't he, Izzy, where you ride a bit bitless and then we're transitioning over to the bit. Here in the middle, this is a Micklin bridle. Micklin bridles are quite good because you can actually detach the bit and you can actually use it as a side pull. And ride off that, and then you can connect the bit back so you're able to ride off the rings or the bit. So they're quite good. But you can just use a rope halter here and just put the bridle on underneath it, and you can do the same thing. So if you just take your time transitioning thoughtfully, just getting the horse really cool with being ridden and then introducing the bit back to them, you really break it down and you really remove like a lot of things the horse is having to cope with. So your training goes faster and smoother. Now, just to finish off, just want to show you this case study here. This is Bella. I got some footage off Bella. This is Bella and her owner, Lauren. Lauren is I wonder if she actually does some training in Western Australia. She's a beautiful rider. This is Bella. At the time these photographs were taken, she was 9 years old. She was off the track. And what Lauren came to me is Lauren would like to create more relaxation and softness. So here's just some photographs. This is Bella at the start of retraining. And you can see that looks like two different horses, doesn't it? This is her before. She was tense, she was reactive, and she had really inconsistent contact. So her head would just keep going up and down, chewing the bit. You can see really stiff-legged. You can see tightness here and everything. And you can see she couldn't really even step up and under herself here at all. Whereas and this was 3 to 4 months between these two photographs. Afterwards, look at her, completely different horse. Nice, bigger, swinging stride length, more out in front. Look at front leg, can't even come out, so tight here. But now she was calm, she's consistent, and with contact and confident. But this is an all-over body thing, okay? So what I've got now is I'm just going to play the video. I'm hoping it's all going to come through good on your webinar. Now, what if I could get, just watch this, and then I'm going to ask you guys to start doing the poll so I don't forget. Let's just watch, because I go through here. I just capture a little snapshot of footage of Bella as she went through our process. So she went through all the groundwork. So we got her really good on the ground in our response. And we don't have a huge number of groundwork exercises, but we got certain things we need to achieve with that. But then going into the saddle, how do we reduce it back? Now, just for interest's sake, Lauren just rode Bella in a bit for the entire time. So she never took the option of going bitless. And this proves that it still works. Okay, so here we go. Just going through. So we started off at lateral flexion and standstill, making sure the horse understood the bit. And then we move into motion, which is these things that I call bend to a stop. Okay. Just getting her to learn to follow the bit, just one rein. Just work on the lateral frame and the lateral response to the bit first. Starting in walk, going all the way to stop, then going up into trot and bending down into walk. Okay. And then up again, just so we're doing these bending, just letting the horse get good at following the bit from one side, just the lateral response. Then we went to picking up 2 reins. So the response the horse needs is to understand is to follow the rein back. And as soon as they do, just dropping the rein and saying yes. Then picking them up and getting them to just hold that kind of soft feel, just a bit of vertical flexion. It's not contact yet. And then letting the reins out and teaching her to stretch down, okay? Then teaching her to seek more with the bit, and you'll see now that this is a few couple of months have passed now, that you can see her body's totally changed now. As her relationship with the bit's changed, her body's got more functional, she's lost all the brace. Now she's starting to learn how to hold the seek response and to actually hold the contact and connect through her body by going through the process. And always checking this response that she stretches forward and down if we let go of the reins. Okay? So you teach horses to be relaxed and soft. So that was my little snapshot there. You saw a horse time travel through the groundwork and all the ridden exercises to get those responses good and work on the body. So please, guys, if you could do us a favor and start doing that poll, and if you're, interested in supporting us and supporting our work and working with us, we are very good at working through, contact issues or behavioral issues and getting a good riding horse from the racehorse. Then how we do it, we've got a website, racehorse2ridinghorse.com.au. That will take us to links. Hang on, Janet just said I couldn't figure out how to move it and hit submit premature. That's okay, Janet. No stress. That's okay. That the website will take us the links to being able to go to our course site where you can enroll in it. And there's the course in there. We've also got a community within there, which is where you can get Isabelle and my help. We're incredibly good at problem solving. We've also got an app that goes with the program as well, and all information is there on the website. What we've also
clarify there that you're not doing this on your own.
God,
we
no.
are there. You can
We're
post
there for you.
videos, ask for support.
Absolutely. And we run intensive events, either 4-week one or 8-week ones, where you can work along as a community, as a group, and we have weekly Zooms during those intensive events that can be super motivating for people and help them kind of get through the steps, because it does take on average, 4 weeks or longer. You can just do it at your own time. It really depends on how much time you've got to devote to it, and if you have anything that horse needs to be rehabbed. Why, just say if they've need a bit of body work or stuff, you might have to slow down or whatever, and go through it a little bit slower. However, look, because you've got this far in the webinar, if you do want to support us and join us in it, we've got if you grab the course and put in at the checkout, whatever it's called, the coupon code CONTACT, you'll get 10% off. It's just only for the next week. It only goes to the 7th of August, 2026. So if you're looking at this webinar of a replay, you can get in and do that, and we support you. Now, interested, just in the last few minutes, does anyone have any questions that they'd like, or any thoughts on that you'd like us to answer at the end of this webinar. And just while I'm waiting for any of those questions to come in, can you please, we do have our racehorse to riding horse. We've got a private group that you can join in. We're happy to answer some questions there and to share some stuff and information about what's going on. And of course, our members of that are always welcome to come to we like doing free webinars to promote understanding of our off the track horses. Plus, we've also got a racehorse to riding horse page on Facebook. Plus, we've got Instagram as well. That's Izzy's job, because I'm an Instagram. I'm too much of a geriatric
And
for
I
that.
promise I will do more. I am also not an ideal Instagram person, but we're starting and we're getting there.
Yeah, Isabel's a lot younger than me, so I've delegated her. That's her job. Okay, so this is a good one here. Michaela's just asked, would a twisting or rotational movement to compensate for lack of balance also show through leg and hoof twisting? What's your thoughts, Izzy?
Yes. So a hoof twist is because the force is not moving forward, it's getting stuck. So, yeah, that's definitely part of it. If they're twisting their legs, it's usually also because they're tighter as they go up. They'll be tighter in the pelvis, and they're just lacking any connection to move forward.
Mm. Thoughts on using a bit as a reposturing tool, high and light, using bit for contact on top of the lips. This is delving into probably some French classical kind of stuff. Look, I've delved into all the classical stuff, everything as well. Izzy, first of all, do you have any comments on that?
Um, you know, that's something to worry about next step.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do have a bit of an opinion on this. It's really, Addie, it's consistency of how you ask them. I understand the French classical, they're saying they're wanting to go to a part of the mouth or lips that hasn't been kind of tainted or whatever, or they have their beliefs. But really, it's just like whatever makes sense for the horse, whatever the initial cue was that you're able to clearly let the horse know what it meant, the horse will learn. I can ask them by a lot of different ways, even bitless. I can get a beautiful posture or whatever just by using bitless, which is not using that at all. But the important thing is not so much that, it's reducing the brace and getting the horse to learn, because the horse puts himself in the posture. And that if they're not wanting to protect themselves or not full of brace and their got body is prepared, you know, they learn really good. They learn really, really good.
Yeah, I think it's, they have to, like we said, you have to have that balance and ability to do it first. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter what you're doing. You're going to struggle.
Yeah. Really good question here from Annie. Can Izzy suggest the simplest, kindest bit for an off the track? Advice from Bitfitter was totally incorrect for a thoroughbred. So I got thoughts, but you go first, Izzy.
So generally, to start with, number one, make sure it's a bit issue, not a contact issue. So you have to figure out your contact first, and then you can tell whether or not a horse likes a bit. But in general, I usually avoid any kind of I like
Single
snaffle
joint
link
snaffles.
because of the trauma that they've often had. So I tend to either use like a port mouth or something like a miler, or the bomber bits that have the, straight little bit across the middle with the swinging sides, or something that just has a straight with a little port in the middle, tend to be the ones that I use, depending on, the other thing is to, hopefully your bit fitter will have told you kind of what the bars look like, how wide the horse's mouth is, how big the tongue is, because that can kind of determine whether or not you put like a thicker port mouth or something thinner like a miler bit in. But definitely something that doesn't have any kind of snapping action is where I start.
So I'm on par with Izzy. I have a go-to bit that I use on horses. It's a Myler MB32. It's the Mullen barrel. it just twists. It doesn't have a lot of movement there. That's always been my go-to bit for years. However, why did I use that bit and why do I pick it? It's because back then when I started delving into contact, there wasn't all the amazing bits that are out there now. So I'm not saying that's the be all and end all, but that's my go-to bit is the MB32. The only one problem is it now is it's actually too because it's only it's 10 millimeter bit, which is actually too thin for a number of equestrian
They've got
Australian sports.
another one,
Yeah,
O something, which is kind of very similar but slightly thicker.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. So yeah, you can get them slightly thicker. So that's a little bit that's always been my go-to. That's what I'll pull out first to use. The other thing is, can I direct you to the bitfitter.com website? This is Anna Minogue. She's an equine dentist and she's a bit fitter, an equine dentist, and she's actually put together some bits of all what she's found has been like the crucial aspects of bits that a lot of horses accept well. So it's very much like the MB3. It doesn't have a lot of movement in it, like Izzy said, not the nutcracker action. It does have a little bit more movement than a mullen, like the one that I use. She's got a Kimberley D ring. She's got she's got a loose ring variety of it. It's just a little bit thicker, so it's legal in a lot of the sports. So check her out, thebitfitter.com. Can I also give her another plug that Anna Minogue has the most amazing little course you can do on bit fitting and bridle fitting that I reckon if you are any human being on the planet that puts a bit in a horse's mouth, you should do that because it just helps, gives you the bare basics, doesn't make you an expert at all, but allows you to check your bits and have an idea about just simple things and also bridles, noseband, etc., how to fit. I think it was the best $99 that I think that's how much it cost. I'm not 100% sure. But it is very vital information that I think everyone should know, besides our course.
Also, just the other bit that I do use a lot if you want a straight port mouth is the Trust Innocence port mouth bit. If some thoroughbreds, I don't know so much about standardbreds, but some of them don't like the thinner bits. So then I use the Trust port mouth, which is a bit thicker. And for the ones that don't like that thicker bit, I tend to use the Miler.
Yeah, cool. My other thing that I will say, Annie, just to finish off there, if your horse doesn't understand the bit fitter could put the most fabulous, lovely fitting bit in the horse's mouth. Your horse is still going to react negatively to it because it feels it has to defend itself against the bit and protect itself and fight against it. And only education will help with that. So you make sure that you tick that box as well. Now, Priscilla has just said, just bought a 2.5-year-old off the track horse. She's had 6 weeks off already. Would you recommend we keep moving forward with her riding quietly twice a week to keep her used to the saddle while she slowly puts on weight and muscle? What do you reckon, Izzy?
Probably not as such. That's probably not really going to be overly helpful for any real reason. If you're giving her time off, give her time off. Otherwise, things like we were saying, starting in the round yard, because especially being young, she probably is lacking a lot of balance because when the young ones have to learn to gallop, really the only way they manage it is by leaning further forward and just moving their legs faster so they don't fall over. So often the very young horses off the track really lack a lot of balance because they lack a lot of strength, stability. So you're much better off giving her a time off that you want to and then starting her in the round yard and making sure she's really properly balanced both ways. And that will also help really build up that core strength that you're looking for to then put the saddle back on.
Yeah. And if you don't have a round yard, of course, you'd start just with groundwork with a halter and lead. Yeah. Introduce that. Priscilla also says, my daughter's 5-year-old off the track had a tongue tie and we were told he gets his tongue over the bit. How do we address this going forward to be safe during cross country? would a winning tongue plate bit help? Okay, I'm going to answer that because I've done a lot of work on horses that get their tongues over bits and very successful at doing it. And what I do is exactly what I've just run through with. Is that horses are doing that. They're getting their tongue over the bit to protect themselves. Normally, I will say heads up that a lot of horses that do that, I've actually found that they have mouth issues, like very sharp bars that they're trying to protect their lulling at a particular side. But as soon as you get the horse to understand and no longer protecting itself, that can really help with that. The winging tongue plate bits or whatever are just like they're like band-aids to try to stop them from actually doing the action when what you want to do is stop the root cause. But Izzy, do you have any thoughts on this as well?
So the winning tongue plate bits with the tongue depressor, not a fan of again because they're essentially just a band-aid. The winning tongue plate snaffle, I find some don't actually mind it because it seems to suit the shape of the bars on a thoroughbred a lot, but essentially it is a bit like a miler or whatever. It's just, it's a nice bit without a cracking action. So if you happen to have the winning tongue plate snaffle without the tongue depressor, not that's a fine bit. But yeah, getting the tongue over is an anxiety thing. There's something they're trying to avoid. And that's, like little side note, a lot of off the trackers have terrible teeth because the quality of dentistry while they're in training is often very awful. So even though they've said, yeah, the horse's teeth were done, they're not done very well.
Mm.
They often have pain somewhere and they'll often be horses that rush, pull hard, and get their tongue over. It all goes hand in hand that there's an anxiety there because they're trying to avoid something. So they put their tongue over. It's very different to things. Sometimes horses put their tongue back because they've got a soft palate issue. That's sort of a bit of a separate thing, and you can hear that. That's more of a medical thing. But yeah, it's an anxiety thing. So again, you need to go back to the beginning.
Yep.
It's the anxiety about contact, and often then you will find, and it can be difficult because, you do all of that work at home, getting them nice and relaxed, get the contact. Then you also have to do all of that same thing while you're out doing cross country because that's quite, high adrenaline sport. So then the anxiety will come back unless you've really solidly addressed it,
Yeah.
get the issue
Yeah.
again.
Yeah, Gift, the horse I showed you that, he used to get his tongue over. That was one of his tricks again. It was just because he was trying to protect himself. But the horses that do, get their tongue over the bits, they really do well by going bitless for a while, then introducing the bit back where they just carry it, and then you slowly reintroduce it. So, habit, but also they're protecting something in them they're trying to protect themselves from the bit. They're trying to protect their mouth from what's happening to them. They're also trying to protect something in their body. There's a reason they're doing it. They're not just doing it out of habit. They've been inspired to do it, or they're doing it to protect themselves. And the way that you fix that is by finding the root cause, but then giving them the time to understand what kind of psychological, assistance they need in getting trust back in the bit and back in the rider and in the activity you're getting them to do. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, like you're saying, I have found that doing working them in a bitless is a really good, once
Yeah.
you've got started, that's a really good way to break that connection.
Yeah, and break that habit of doing that. Anyway, everyone, we'll sign off now, but thank you so much for joining us. You'll be able to get a replay of this webinar. It will be in your emails tomorrow. And I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks so much, and thanks for your
Thanks,
thanks within the chat. That's really good. We hope you enjoyed that, and that gave you some insights, and hope you're able to get that poll finished, because that lets us know, because there was a section there I wanted to know what else you wanted to know about, because that helps us decide what topic we're going to do next. But yes, for those that want to support us and work with us and have us on your side as you, get these lovely horses off the track, and convert them into lovely riding horses, which they can. But you need to understand them, and having some support, some people that know how to do that, is a very beneficial thing. Okay, and don't forget the coupon code contact if you want to get in on that. Anyway, Izzy, thanks so much for your time. I'm just going to I'm going to stop share screen now and say good night, everyone.
See you
See you.
guys.
Bye.